What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to our video. Today we're reacting to how far would Luffy make it in Naruto realistically. Now, as a One Piece fan, I think Luffy got all the villains packed up. Sorry, I said it. I think he beats all. I think he beats all the villains. But let's see what Sage has to say.
In my opinion, Naruto is clearly stronger than Luffy, which is something that I don't think I have to convince most people of at this point. However, with that said, there's still a place for Luffy amongst the Naruto hierarchy, which is why in today's video, we'll find out.
Let's see. He beats Pain, he beats Orochimaru, he beats Sasuke. I don't know about Kaguya.
Exactly where he ranks. I think it goes without saying that the first matchup we should start with this East Blue Luffy versus Haku, as it's pretty much
so we're doing arc by arc in both verses, alright.
Representative of the initial version of Luffy going up against Naruto's first real antagonist. Starting off with speed, not only is Haku capable of blitzing the perception of two average human level thugs, a blatantly subsonic level feat, but he also shouldn't be any slower than the Naruto who was casually able to blitz the same fodder with substitution jutsu, a feat that would require Naruto to be moving at around Mach 1.2.
Pretty sure East Blue Luffy should be faster. Right, he should be faster than anyone in the first actual big arc, like this one arc. Any character there. I mean, any villain, the first villain there.
Or slightly faster than the speed of sound. And then in terms of attack potency, Haku's ice style shouldn't be any weaker than pre-Land of Wave Sasuke's Fireball Jutsu, which can either be calced at building or multi-city block level depending on if you consider the destruction to be vaporization or violent fragmentation. Getting into Luffy's scaling though, in terms of speed, even early on he's shown to be capable of intercepting bullet fire at nearly twice the speed of sound, and he could even outrun point-blank explosions by moving at around Mach 8. This would in turn allow Luffy to dodge and outpace Haku with ease. Especially since Land of Wave Sasuke, who's only about half as fast as Luffy, was shown and stated to be faster than the Demon's Prodigy in terms of hand-to-hand combat. As for strength, things don't get any better.
And you have to counter the fact that Haku doesn't hockey or isn't strong enough, he shouldn't be able to hurt Luffy, considering he is dirty rubber.
For Haku.
So blunt force attack shouldn't be able to hurt him at this point right yet.
Honesty, bro has zero durability feats other than getting one shot by KN0 Naruto, whose best strength showing is brawling against a giant snake. And in my opinion, if you think Naruto's feats against this giant snake are his most impressive displays of strength, then there's no way you don't think East Blue Luffy who KO'd a Lord of Coast is too
episode 1
weak to damage Haku.
Yeah.
Also, outside of visuals, the fact that Luffy was able to injure Buggy in like Chapter 7 would also just scale him to several explosions from the Orange Town arc. With all of these explosions having energy yields that are anywhere from high multi-city block to town level in terms of output, and are notably much more destructive than any feats we see in the Naruto series pre-tuning exams. Now, if you know me, I've always said that destructive capacity doesn't necessarily equate to AP. But because most people scale this way, I just wanted to make it known that Haku wouldn't be the one at an advantage if we're determining strength off what series has greater destructive feats in
easy pack
their first arc. My main point though is that considering we see Luffy in the East Blue do things like destroy giant buildings with a single kick, bust through steel armor with sheer force, and injure characters capable of tanking destructive feats greater than anything we see pre-tuning exams, I genuinely see no reason Luffy doesn't just straight up outpace.
Like one shot.
Sobrang vouch ko tong Axe Fine Fragrance Collection. Content, fresh, for one full day. And para sa presyo na to, sulit na.
And kill Haku with a few hits. That said, before I move on to Luffy's next opponent, I obviously need to address the elephant in the room, which is Haku's Ice Mirrors. The technique that most people know by now is often claimed to let him move at the speed of light. Now, I'm really not here to argue about whether or not you think Haku can move at light speed. What I will say
Even
though,
if he does outspeed Luffy, I don't think he has the AP or like strength to actually hurt him. Because like I said earlier, he's rubber. Therefore, any impact there, like literally early on in this story of Naruto, shouldn't be able to hurt Luffy at all, or like barely make Luffy hurt.
was that the moment Naruto entered KN0, Haku, despite holding back the entire fight previously, most definitely intended to heavily injure Naruto, but was unable to do so. Therefore, even if Haku is able to blitz Luffy for a while with his ice mirrors,
I guess you can use sharp objects to hurt Luffy. But Luffy's definitely faster, so I think he'll just dodge that easily.
he'd basically be doing no damage due to how durable Luffy is in comparison to Naruto.
Yeah.
Furthermore, since Haku can't keep up his light speed movements for long and was eventually getting reacted to by Sasuke, then Luffy basically just has to wait for Haku to run out of chakra, or he could just smash every mirror one by one until the same thing occurs. Either way, even if Haku does use his ice mirrors, I'm confident that even East Blue Luffy would beat him with very little difficulty.
Yeah.
Getting into how Luffy matches up against Gaara, this is an extremely hard fight to analyze just because of how many transformations the Jinchuriki undergoes during the Konoha Crush arc. That being said, because transformed Gaara is basically his full power without completely transforming
Wait,
into
which are we going for Luffy? Alabasta?
Haku,
I guess?
we'll be talking about him in particular. As far as how this Gaara compares to East Blue Luffy in terms of strength though, I think he's pretty comparable. Since not only does Gaara have destructive feats comparable to Luffy, such as tearing through large portions of a forest,
I
but he should
I know about Gaara right now, like a lot, because I just reacted to another video.
also
Like Crocodile vs Gaara one.
be far stronger than the Naruto who was trading blows with Orochimaru's giant snake, which is roughly similar in size to the Lord of the Coast that Luffy one-shot. And then in terms of speed, Monster Gaara simply outclasses. The reason I say this is because even though East Blue Luffy edges out Land of Wave Sasuke in speed by a slight margin, Gaara on the other hand is so fast that he was able to force Black Suit Sasuke into using the Sharingan.
But what arc are we going for Luffy then? Because then I'll see if he's faster or not.
Keep up with his movements, with this Sasuke being multiple blitz tiers above the version of himself that fought Haku. Therefore, logic would simply dictate that while East Blue Luffy could theoretically keep up with Gaara in terms of strength,
we're still going for East Blue Luffy? Okay.
the speed gap would erase any chance he would have in a 1v1. With East Blue Luffy down though, the next version up is Alabasta Saga Luffy, who has a notable improvement in terms of stats across the board. When it comes to speed, Luffy has shown that he's on par with the likes of Zoro during the events of Whiskey Peak. This is notable because this version of Zoro was able to casually blitz the perception of 100 mercenaries and appear behind them without them even noticing. A feat that would require him to be moving at around Mach 25, putting Zoro and by extension Luffy in the same speed tier as Gaara. Now in regards to strength, things start to become a wash, since at the end of the Alabasta arc, we see that Luffy is capable of throwing a barrage of punches that he calls the Gum Gum Storm to knock out Crocodile. With this attack being so powerful that he was able to simultaneously send the Warlord flying through several miles of bedrock, while also collapsing an entire city square.
If this was Minecraft, I would say Luffy's infinite, because in Minecraft you can't break bedrock. I'm sorry.
Full of large buildings in the process. So basically, I see this fight starting with Luffy and Gaara keeping pace with each other and both landing hits. But once Luffy recognizes his clear strength advantage, he would start laying into Gaara with the
like
Gum
Goku. Goku tests your strength, but once he realizes he's stronger, it's over.
Storm, much like Naruto's 2K barrage. Except for the caveat that every strike from Luffy would be bone-crushing and outright fatal to the point that Shukaku would never even fully emerge, thereby giving Luffy another win against the gauntlet. Getting into Luffy's next opponent, the only villain that makes sense is Zabuza, as despite technically coming before Gaara as an antagonist, he's a much higher level threat. This mainly stems from the showings and implications that elite level Jonin such as Zabuza, Kakashi, and Guy operate in a completely different class than Genin Age characters, including Gaara, who is a special case. And at the very least, via Zabuza being relative to Kakashi in speed, he should be much faster than Gaara. With Kakashi being so fast that even as a teen he was able to tag a lightning bolt.
Okay, just realize, we're not going for arc, we're just going for arc as in, if Luffy beats that guy and another villain tries to fight him, and he still wins, we're still going off for that Luffy, okay.
Before it hit the ground, and then as an adult he was seen straight up just intercepting lightning style attacks with his bare hands, meaning Zabuza likewise should be able to fight at speeds comparable to lightning. This is extremely
Well,
important
Luffy's
because
immune
with
to lightning.
Zabuza being relative to the speed of lightning, that means he would outspeed and blitz Luffy by a wide margin. And while I know that
guess.
Zabuza doesn't have visible
Probably.
strength feats on par with Alabasta Luffy, what I do know is that nigga was about to get beheaded by fodder-ass Buggy in Loketown with a regular sword. And I promise you, if you could theoretically ask Oda himself, even he would tell you that Zabuza with the Executioner's Blade should be able to do the exact same thing. However, even if you're not convinced of this, at the end of the day, Zabuza still uses water style in character, and one giant vortex basically spells the end of the Straw Hat Cap.
Now, if we're not going for verse equalization, then it shouldn't matter because of water. The only water that Luffy's affected, or any Delphin abuser, is seawater. And the only seawater that can affect the Delphin users is specifically One Piece world. Because that's the seawater of the One Piece world that hates Delphin users. So if we're going off for a different verse of seawater, like his water, then it shouldn't affect Luffy. So why are you saying he loses?
Which is why I ultimately can't see Alabasta Luffy making it past the Demon of the Mist. That said, by the time Skypiea rolls around, Luffy would at least gain speed comparable to Zabuza via reacting
He already fights a literal lightning guy.
in combating Enel's lightning attacks. But at the same time, Zabuza can also perform the hidden mist jutsu, which effectively blinds opponents and Zabuza himself. However, unlike most of his opponents, he can locate people based on sound alone, allowing him to pinpoint someone's location. And since Skypiea Luffy doesn't have observation haki or really any form of extrasensory at this point, he'd fare no better than the previous version of himself due to being unable to see.
Really?
Once Eni's lobby rolls
Are you sure
around
about
and Luffy
that?
unlocks Gear 2 though,
whatever.
everything
Whatever. But we're already here at Gear 2, so it's already wraps for him.
changes. Because for those who haven't read the events of
So he
Eni's
got one-
lobby,
he gets one
we've
shot by
literally
Gear
seen
2
Luffy
Luffy.
fight a character relative to him in speed like Zabuza and Blueno. And as soon as Luffy entered Gear 2, he started absolutely dominating and outclassing the
does.
CP0 agent in every way. Therefore, even if we assume that the Demon of the Mist is as strong as Blueno, the moment Luffy starts using the second gear,
He has one
he's
shot
going
it.
to literally beat the dog shit out of Zabuza in the exact same manner, putting Luffy back in the win column.
What? Yo, this looks fun. What game is this? Horror? I'm gonna play this, guys.
With Zabuza out of the way, I think the next most appropriate opponent in the gauntlet would have to be Orochimaru,
Orochimaru.
who
Wait,
is
this guy's like immortal, right? So I don't know how Luffy would beat him.
on a completely
Not gonna
different
lie.
level than the Demon of the Mist. So much so that Kakashi, the one who defeated Zabuza, could see his own death by simply looking into Orochimaru's eyes, showing you just what kind of threat this man is right off the bat. Which is definitely justified when you
actually aura.
consider that the first statement about Bro's power is that he could destroy a small country all by himself. Aside from statements, Orochimaru's feats such as injuring Tsunade, who is directly stated to be stronger than the 4th Raikage, as well as clashing with Hiruzen, who was hailed as the most powerful of the 5 Kage at the time, clearly place him in a tier relative to A the 4th. This is important because the Raikage is so powerful that Karin noted his chakra was on the level of that of a Biju, with the only Biju she had seen at that point being the A-Tails, who like all tailed beasts can create a Biju bomb that packs enough power to reduce an entire mountain into dust. And when charging these Biju bombs, they can create a blast with so much AoE that it was able to span an entire mountain range and was so tall that it peaked at altitudes relative to cloud formations, with some estimating that this blast generated close to country levels of energy, which possibly makes Hiruzen's statement about Orochimaru's power more consistent.
Okay.
Either way you look at it, I think full power Orochimaru in terms of raw stats is
Yeah, I
likely
can
a
see
blitz
Luffy
tier
losing
above
this,
Lightning
not
due
gonna
to his
lie.
superiority to Kakashi, and has strength scaling that would slot him anywhere between mountain to country level depending on how you interpret the Hiruzen statement and Biju Bomb scaling. So at this point, discussing any version of Luffy pre-time skip versus Orochimaru is pretty embarrassing. Since while Luffy by the end of pre-time skip is pulling off crazy feats like dodging point-blank laser fire, clearing giant thunderstorms with the wave of his arm, and tanking hits from a guy who can split islands with a single punch, these feats are way more consistently in the city level tier as opposed to mountain level and up. And while you could make
Really? I'm pretty sure Luffy Gear 3 could just destroy a whole mountain.
the argument that Luffy would be able to react to all of Orochimaru's attacks due to his insanely high reaction time, it doesn't really mean much, since in order for Luffy to even have a chance of beating Oro, he'd need to enter Gear 2. Something that would be a horrible idea due to how harsh the stamina drain was on his body before the time skip.
Yeah.
From there, Orochimaru would just have to put Luffy on the back foot until he runs out of energy, and then it would be GG's due to him being unable to defend himself, giving Orochimaru the win over any version of Luffy from Enies Lobby to Marine Ford. Speaking of the time skip though, next up to run the fade is the version of Luffy from Return to Sabaody, all the way up until he fights
fast.
Doflamingo and Dressrosa. As unlike Naruto, bro was quite literally relying on his 2 years of training for hundreds of chapters, but more on that later. Anyways, post-time
Luffy should be able to deal easier villains right now.
skip, Luffy right away distinguishes himself as a
Let's see.
completely
Mastered observational haki, mastered basic armament haki, mastered conquerors haki. Shouldn't be a problem.
different level of fighter compared to how strong he was in the last 200 chapters of pre-time skip.
Oh yeah, he should have Gear 4 here too. And better control of his stamina with Gear 2 and Gear 3.
This becomes clear when Luffy encounters a pacifista for the first time in 2 years, where he goes on to effortlessly dodge its laser fire with a slight head tilt before one-shotting it as it attempted to fire
So
another
sick.
light beam. For these reasons, I think it's fairly safe to say that Luffy after his training with Rayleigh not only has reaction time relative to the speed of light, but he should also be able to fight at around low relativistic speeds. On top of his insane increase in speed though, his strength gains are arguably even more notable. I say this because before the time skip, Gear 2 Luffy was actually struggling to deal meaningful damage to a pacifista,
Yeah.
even with help from Zoro and Sanji, who have always been at least on par with their captain. In fact, after relying on the entire crew for support, Luffy still had to use Gear 3 just to finish it off. This would mean that Luffy, after training with Rayleigh, would increase his strength so much that his Gear 2 punches became roughly equivalent to, and even stronger than his pre-time skip Gear 3 attacks. In fact, Luffy at this point is so strong that like Orochimaru, he should consistently slot in the mountain to island level range in terms of attack potency. With this not only being shown to us through feats like Gear 3 Luffy destroying Pika's mountain-sized head, but also via him scaling to Don Shinjao, who despite getting his head fucking folded like a lawn chair by Garp, was still able to withstand the same punches he used to turn mountains into dust. And let me emphasize, this is just how strong Luffy is in the third gear, because when he enters the fourth, his power gets turned up to another level.
Raps. Just from the impact of Doflamingo's body, he was able to destroy almost the entire country.
Because for those who don't know, it's just blatantly stated by Doflamingo that Luffy's power had increased many-fold beyond its limit in the fourth gear, which is defined as at least an order of magnitude. Therefore, there's a good case that Gear 4 Luffy's standard attack scale to island level in terms of strength consistently. And there are even calcs placing his King Kong gun in the country level tier just like the 8 and 9 tails Super Biju Bomb. Meaning that unless you clearly have an agenda, you shouldn't be arguing one of these characters has a massive strength advantage over the other. Regarding both characters' speed though, things are a completely different story. Because like I mentioned before, post-time skip Luffy is starting to operate in the relativistic tier in terms of overall speed, while Orochimaru is still at best only a blitz level above lightning. Now, in my previous assessment on Orochimaru versus Gear 2 Luffy, I also established that even if Luffy is faster than Orochimaru and can evade every one of his attacks, he would still need to enter Gear 2, or in this case Gear 4, to actually overwhelm him. The main problem with this situation though is not the fact that Gear 4 Luffy is too weak to injure Orochimaru, but rather that the Snake Sanin's whole fighting style is built around not caring about taking damage. This means that even if Gear 4 Luffy is capable of outspeeding Orochimaru
but he's not Tsunade like you saw in that fucking scene,
beating the dog shit out of him in the same way he did Dofi, the major difference would be that any blunt force trauma Luffy inflicts on the Snake Sanin would amount to absolutely nothing. Since on top of Orochimaru having the ability to...
What the hell?
regenerate from any wound by shedding his own
That's
body.
disgusting.
He can also casually survive fatal wounds like having his throat slit or literally being severed in half. Therefore, even though Orochimaru is massively slower than Luffy and gets the dog shit beaten out of him, he'd arguably weather the storm even better than Dofi.
I guess.
After his initial assault though, like in his fight with the Warlord, Luffy would run out of haki in an attempt to overwhelm the
10
Snake
minutes.
Sani, leaving him a sitting duck just like in canon, but with no one to help him, giving Orochimaru another win. Shifting into how Whole Cake Island Luffy matches up against Orochimaru, he doesn't fare
Snake versus snake. Who wins?
much better. Since even though there's this widely agreed upon misconception about
Yeah.
Luffy haki blooming against Katakuri and becoming dozens of times stronger, the reality is that Luffy never actually grew in terms of physical strength during the fight. Because even though people love
The fuck did you just say? Of course he got stronger. Bro, he was getting his ass beaten by Katakuri at the start, and then on base form, he was literally fighting Katakuri in base, right? And Katakuri even acknowledges that he's no longer inferior to him. What?
the Sight Rayleigh's statement about haki growing
And he also learned Future Sight and the new form.
stronger when facing powerful foes, they tend to ignore that he was specifically referring to Luffy's observation haki development. With it even being pointed out by Luffy and confirmed by Katakuri himself that his real strength lies in his use of Future Sight, not in his overwhelming physical power. So while Luffy gaining Future Sight is a major
But he still got stronger physicality. Even if it's just observation hockey and Future Sight, he still got stronger. Like,
addition to
What?
his toolkit going forward, it doesn't really change the fact that he isn't going to be able to kill Orochimaru in one shot before
I
running out of
guess.
haki.
right?
Putting yet
If Orochimaru is able to tank, I guess, and still survive, I guess he'll like win. I don't know.
another version of Luffy on the Snake Sani.
Now, if we get Gear 5, that's the things would change. He goes Gear 5, changes Orochimaru's DNA, and he dies. That's the truth.
Kill list. With that said though, once Luffy unlocks Advanced Conqueror's haki,
This should be wraps, right? Come on.
Orochimaru is absolutely cooked. Because by
Yeah.
that time, Luffy had grown so powerful that
He at base he was keeping up with Kaido. I mean, not overthrowing Kaido, but he was at least keeping up.
he went from
That's
being
not
one
a small feat.
shot by the likes of Base Kaido even in Gear 4, to clashing evenly and splitting the sky with an even stronger Hybrid Kaido, which is a feat that has been consistently calced in a large country level tier in terms of kinetic energy output. Couple that with the fact that I already thought Luffy was operating at sub-relativistic speeds before
Yeah.
the Wano arc where he would go on to get Blitz tiers faster, and I just think that no matter how much of a tank Orochimaru is, Onigashima Luffy just horribly outscales him.
Because like one punch from Luffy with Rio should kill him and make him explode from the inside out. He just keep doing the same thing over and over until
Putting
he
the sh-
until he tires out and kill himself.
Straw Hat Captain,
So, you're looking for an easy way to generate 3D models from your 2D images.
No, I'm not looking
a
for that.
problem.
That is a
back
problem.
in the win column. Now, I'm sure a lot of people from here were expecting me to go over how Luffy matches up against various members of
Uh-huh.
the Akatsuki, as they are for all intents and purposes the main villains throughout the entirety of Part 2. That said, because of time constraints, as well as the fact that I want to discuss how Luffy performs against the Akatsuki in its own dedicated video, I unfortunately can't go into further detail.
Why?
What I will do though is discuss how Luffy performs in the place of Naruto in his fight against the Edo Jinchuriki
What?
and White Mask Obito, as I think it's a similar level of difficulty to fighting all Akatsuki members at the same time. That said, since I've already gone over the Biju scaling in the Orochimaru section and discussed Luffy scaling pretty thoroughly, I basically just picture a battle between Luffy and the Tailed Beast playing out exactly like their fight against Madara. Except instead of being smacked by an invisible Limbo clone, it'd just be Luffy using Elephant Gun to knock them all out the same way he folded the giant
Yeah.
octopus from Fishman Island. Oh yeah, and regarding Obito, he's basically a non-threat, as even if you think that bro scales to around light speed at this point and could simply touch Luffy for the win because of Kamui, you just
Luffy just outscales him in speed. And the feature side as well.
blatantly be wrong. This is because after unlocking Advanced
Yeah, Advanced Conqueror's Haki, he doesn't even need to touch him. So he can keep his distance while dodging with feature sight.
conquers Haki, Luffy becomes capable of fighting at faster than light speeds, shown by the fact that he can go blow for blow with a faster version of the same Kaido who previously blitzed him, especially since Luffy himself refers to light as slow, essentially making Kaido, and by extension Luffy, canonically faster than light. Furthermore, even if Luffy and White Mask Obito were relative in speed, and you try to argue that Obito would just Kamui diff, I feel like you'd be overlooking the fact that Luffy can easily avoid being touched thanks to Future Sight,
Yeah.
and on top of that he has a literal hard counter to Kamui in the form of Rio, which lets him damage Obito's internal organs without even making direct contact. Additionally, if you think I'm an absolute idiot for not mentioning how the Nine Tails is planetary and how the Biju are multi-continental, I honestly
I
won't
hate
even
when
argue.
Naruto uses this fucking image the whole time. If that was the case, why didn't the fucking why didn't anyone with stronger than Naruto would just do this World to Ash, right? Or be able to beat anyone easily.
With you. However, what I will say is that if you have no problem arguing for multi-continental to planetary level Naruto, then you should also have absolutely no issue with planetary
Yeah.
Luffy based on him being in the same realm of power as Whitebeard, who has been stated by multiple sources to possess the power
the
to
power to
destroy
destroy
the
the
One
world.
Piece planet, which is arguably far larger than
Which is better than turning the world to ash, right?
the Naruto planet. Now, to be clear, I personally think that planetary One Piece and The Last Naruto are both bullshit metas fueled heavily by bias. But
yeah.
at the same time, I think it's extremely unfair
I think One Piece will go not planetary when we get to the final war. I do think that will happen.
to deliberately lowball an entire verse to a
'Cause
level
if Boruto could do that, though, why can't One Piece do?
that you know is below your favored one just because you like it more. And that's exactly why, no matter how you look at it, Wano Luffy, whether he has help or not, is beating the Biju and then Obito. Now, as dominant as current Luffy would be against 95% of the Naruto verse, once we start getting into Ten Tails level threats, bro is pretty cooked. The reason for this is simple.
Why?
Once we see Naruto dodging Madara's Light Fang and characters like Kaguya and Sasuke blitzing Naruto with techniques such as Ash killing Bone and Chidori, we finally get concrete evidence of high-tier Naruto characters operating at light speed to faster than light levels. Taking that into account, if Luffy has to fight Jubito, Kaguya, or especially Madara, he's absolutely done for. Because even
You're not even counting for Gear 5 yet.
within his own verse, we've seen that the Gorosei who possess similar levels of regeneration are essentially impossible to defeat without a specific level of Haki that Luffy does not have yet, making it essentially impossible for current Gear 5 Luffy to beat any opponent with high levels of regeneration, which in this case would include Jubito, Madara, and Kaguya. And before anyone brings it up, no, Luffy's Toon Force abilities will not save him here.
Of course it does. Of course it will.
As while Gear 5 does grant Luffy a form of cartoon-like reality manipulation similar to classic Saturday morning cartoon characters, his abilities are still bounded by the overall power scaling of the One Piece verse. With this making itself clear through the fact that we've never once seen Luffy defeat someone purely through Toon Force in the series, making it almost moronic to
What? What do you mean? There's Kaido, Kizaru, and Lucy. So far.
assume that he beats characters who scale far higher than him due to his low level of reality manipulation.
Let's be honest, Luffy would solo the Gorosei, all 5 of them, if they didn't have regeneration.
So no matter which way you slice it, Luffy does
Luffy does win. He does win. You can argue with me. But yeah, thanks for watching YouTube. Hope you subscribe, like, hit the notification bell to see more debates, content like this in the future. But until next time, I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.